Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation. Hello, and thank you for joining this live webinar presented by the Cisco Learning Network. This webinar will be recorded and made available on the Cisco Learning Network, and information on how to access the recording will be emailed to you following the live session. Please allow up to 5 business days for the full recording to be made available. Thank you very much and enjoy the presentation.
This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Rigo Villa. I'm one of the community managers on the Cisco Learning Network, and I'll be your host today. In this session, we will be covering managing Cisco IOS-XE routers using Catalyst SD-WAN Manager with our speaker and presenter, Rohit Raj. But before we get started, I just wanted to share a couple of quick housekeeping notes. First, if you have any questions during this webinar, we ask that you please post them in the question and answer panel, as that would help our panelists manage and keep track of all of your questions and would also allow them to provide you with a much more timely response. Also, if you experience any audio streaming issues during the live presentation, I do recommend using the call-in telephone number that I'm going to be posting in the chat window here in just a moment. And at the end of this webinar, you're going to get a pop-up survey with a couple of questions about today's presentation. And we would really appreciate it if you can just take a moment to fill it out and share with us any thoughts or feedback that you may have about today's session. And last but not least, I want to let our attendees know that this session will be recorded and will be available on demand. Also, we are live streaming this on our Cisco YouTube channel. So I hope that you can, check us out again after the live session. And I'm going to be posting some more information in the chat window on how you can catch up on the on-demand recording as well. Without any further delay, I am now going to turn it over to our speaker to get us started. So Rohit, if you're ready, please take it away.
Hey, thank you, Rigo. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for the quick introduction, Rigo. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Like Rigo said, today we'll be discussing a Cisco SD-Routing technology. And my goal is for you to leave this presentation with an understanding of the use case and benefit of SD-Routing technology. You will be also learning about the various onboarding method for SD-Routing capable devices and how do we manage, monitor, and configure those SD-Routing devices from the single glass of pane. There are a lot of useful features that we are going to talk about today, and I'm excited to deliver this webinar. So in today's session, we are covering the some of the overview of SD routing, and then we'll take a look into the SD routing use cases, some of the features, and what are the licenses that is required for SD routing implementation. Then we'll take a look into the how do we onboard the SD routing capable devices into the SD-WAN manager. And at the end of this session, we also have a demo, like how do we perform the onboarding things. So before we dive into SD routing technology, I'd like to inform you some of the recent rebranding happened with the Cisco SD-WAN solution. That is started with the software release, which is 20.12. And here are the list of name changes that you see as the result of rebranded happened with the SD-WAN. So what you see here, the old name is the Cisco SD-WAN. Now we call it Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN. The vManage is now known as the Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN Manager. The vAnalytics now known as the Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN Analytics. Similarly, the vBond is, we call it Cisco SD-WAN Validator, and the vSmart, we call it Cisco Catalyst SD-WAN Controller. So now let's start what is SD routing. So to begin with the today's topic, let's understand how the WAN looks like today. Among all of the WAN deployment today, a majority of them are using a traditional routing. Some of them have adopted and moved to the SD-WAN technology, and some of them are still using the traditional routing based deployment. And they are thinking to move to the SD-WAN technology to leverage its benefit like single glass of pane for management, automated multi-cloud integration workflow, and single dashboard to manage all of the multi-cloud provider. And they just wanted to know how the journey looks like and how to get there, and how to manage a mixture of traditional routing and SD-WAN deployment. So we introduced SD routing with the software release 20.12, 7.12. And with SD routing feature enabled in the Catalyst SD-WAN Manager, let you help to manage your traditional based routing deployment and SD-WAN based routing deployment as well. So let's understand some of the overview of SD routing. SD routing feature works on your Cisco IOS-XE based router that are running in the autonomous mode. We call it non-SD-WAN IOS-XE mode. As you all know, the universal IOS-XE image comes with the two operating mode, which are the autonomous mode and the controller mode. The default mode for IOS-XE mode will be the autonomous. The SD routing feature works on your IOS-XE router when they operates in autonomous mode. And SD-WAN feature works when their routers operate in the controller mode. So let's just say that if you have an on-premises hosted controller, then the SD routing implementation require a Cisco DNS software-based subscription on your VANS devices. And if device already have an active Cisco DNS subscription, you can onboard those devices on your on-premises controller for SD routing implementation. And if you have an existing cloud-hosted controller that are running on the 20.12 software version, you can use it for SD routing implementation. So the minimum support version for SD routing is that your manager and validator should be on 20.12 and the router should be at least 17.12.1 version. For cloud delivered controller, SD routing will be enabled in the near future. So from the component perspective, the only difference between the SD-WAN and SD routing is that the SD routing doesn't require a SD-WAN controller, which is previously we call it vSmart. So the SD routing require your SD-WAN manager and the validator, but the SD-WAN deployment require all three of them, which are your manager, validator, and the controller. In addition to that, your SD routing devices will establish the transit control connection to your SD-WAN validator and maintain a permanent control connection to your SD-WAN manager. But the devices is not going to form the connection with your SD-WAN controller. With your SD-WAN deployment, all of your SD-WAN devices will form the control connection with all of the SD-WAN controller component, which are your manager, validator, and controller. Now let's move to the SD-WAN, some of the use cases, SD routing, some of the use cases. So in this section, I'll be walking through you the SD routing journey and its use cases. So once you onboard the devices to the Catalyst SD-WAN Manager, the first use case will be your lifecycle management. That means from the single pane of glass, you will be managing all of onboarding devices in your networking. And the second use case will be help you to enable the direct internet access with the embedded security. The third use case will help you to enable the multi-cloud access from the branch to your AWS and Azure cloud. So in this slide, we are going to discuss about the use case one, which is the lifecycle management for your SD routing devices. So you basically, you will be monitoring the devices, which is some of the device specific attributes like the CPU uses, memory uses, interface status, and the interface statistics. You can also use some of the SD-WAN Manager built-in tools like the ping, traceroute, SSH to devices. You can also generate the admin tag, which is very similar to show tag that you used to generate from the router CLI. But here from SD-WAN Manager user interface, you can generate the admin tag for your SD routing devices. From the software management perspective, you can perform the software upgrade also. You can also manage the software images, like how many images you want to keep on the router and which image should be the default. So those kind of tasks you can perform on the SD routing devices. And with 20.13 and 70.13 release, you also get the speed test and packet capture feature. Next, we have a use case 2, which is your secure internet access with the embedded security. So this feature support with the 17.13 software release if you have on your router, and 20.13 on your manager and the validator. So let's just say that if you want to enable the secure direct internet access for one of your branches with the embedded security that includes the zone-based firewall, IPS, URL filtering, AMP, and TZ. So you will just need to follow the security workflow, which you see on the middle of this slide. First of all, you will need to create a configuration group and then attach it to the devices. Then you will need to create an embedded security policy that includes the zone-based firewall, IPS, URL filtering, AMP, and TZ. You will configure all of these security features based on your use cases and the requirement. Then you will need to create a policy group, associate the embedded security policy into your policy group, and then deploy on the router or devices where you want to implement the this feature. And once that is done, the branch has the safe internet access with the full embedded security stack deployed. And in addition to that, from the SD-WAN Manager, you will be able to monitor the security stack, such as in the firewall rule, threat from the single dashboard. Next, we have a use case 3, which is your SD routing cloud on RAM for multi-cloud, which help you to connect your branches to the AWS and Azure cloud. So again, to support this implementation, your router should be on 70.13 software version, and your manager and validator should be on 20.13 software version. So let's just say that you have enabled the secure direct internet access with the embedded security on your one of the branches, and you want to connect the branch directly to the workload that you have in your public cloud. That could be your AWS and Azure. So we do support SD routing cloud on RAM for multi-cloud branch connect with your AWS TZW and branch connect with the Azure Virtual Hub. And for that, the minimum support version is 17.13 for your managed router is needed, and 20.13 for your Catalyst SD-WAN Manager and the validator is needed. So the topology that you see on the left-hand side is the example for the AWS branch connect. So let's just say that if you want to have a IPsec tunnel from your branch router to the TZW that you have on the AWS cloud, so that is possible with the workflow that we have in our SD-WAN Manager. So in that case, you will need to follow the branch connect workflow that we have in our SD-WAN Manager for this use case. For that, you will need to create a CLI-based configuration group template and then apply it to the your devices. Once that is done, you will need to create the transit gateway and then define the intent. Once you define the intent, which is basically you are telling that which service VRF will be accessing the VPCs that you have in your public cloud and then attached to the devices. In addition to that, the SD-WAN Manager will be able, from the SD-WAN Manager, you will be able to monitor the intent from the single dashboard. All right, so now that we have covered the SD routing overview and some of the use cases that we have for your SD routing implementation, now let's understand some of the feature that is available with the SD routing and what are the licenses that is needed for SD routing implementation. So what we are seeing here, the SD routing feature highlights. As you know, the SD routing implementation start with the software release 20.12, 70.12 software release. So that your manager and validator should be on the 20.12 and the managed router should be on 70.12 at least to implement the SD routing features. So with 20.12, 70.12 software release, the Cisco primary focus on the device lifecycle management, like how do we onboard the devices, device monitoring, troubleshooting, software lifecycle management. So that means you can onboard the devices in SD routing fabric You can monitor the devices, you can troubleshoot, you can perform the software upgrade from the Catalyst SD-WAN Manager to your SD-Routing capable devices. And then with the 20.13 and 70.13 software release, the Cisco primary focus on the configuration lifecycle management, especially into the security and multi-cloud configuration. Obviously, we have done some of the enhancement on the infrastructure side as well. So next we have SD routing licenses. Let me just briefly touch on the licensing part here. So there are two types of licensing we have. One is for your on-premises controller and other is for your cloud hosted controller. So whatever you are seeing here in this slide in the blue color, they are available today and other are coming in the next few months. You will see it. Let's start with the on-premises controller first. So as you know, the Catalyst 8000 series go with the mandatory DNA attached at the time of purchase. And if the DNA is still active, you are entitled to download the SD-WAN Manager and Validator and install them on your on-premises and start using the SD routing features. For cloud delivered controller, SD routing will be required the licenses like DNA CDCS, which is your cloud delivered Catalyst SD-WAN, and the DNA CDCS SKU for your SD routing, which is still on the roadmap. For legacy platform like ISR 4000 series, ASR 1000 series, and ISR 1000 series router, a new monitoring or only license is also in the roadmap, which will provide you the capability to onboard the router using the ZTP. You can monitor, you can troubleshoot, and then the software management lifecycle as well, but not the configuration thing. Next, let's understand like how do we onboard the SD routing devices into the SD routing fabric. So before we dive into the onboarding methods, let's understand the prerequisites for SD routing implementation. So as we discussed in the previous slide, for SD routing implementation, the minimum support version is 20.12 is needed for your Catalyst SD-WAN Manager and the validator, and 70.12.1 is for your IOS-XE based router.
Hey, Rohit Raj. I think I lost.
Apologies,
Can
everybody.
anybody?
Yeah,
Asked him.
yeah. Please bear with
But
us,
my
attendees. We'll. Oh, I think he maybe back there. Apologies to our audience for the technical difficulties. I think we'll be up and running in just a moment here.
Site ID, system IP, validator IP address.
Hey, Rohit. Sorry for the disturbance. We lost you in the last couple of minutes. Actually, there was no audio.
All right. So I mean, from this slide. Okay, fine. So okay, so we are just going to discuss about some of the onboarding method for your SD routing implementation. So here we are discussing about some of the prerequisites before we jump into the onboarding method. So as you know, the SD routing implementation support started from the 20.12 software release, that is for your Catalyst SD-WAN Manager and the validator, and 70.12 for your IOS-XE based router. So only Cisco IOS-XE 17.12.1 Universal 9 image is supported, and make sure it is operating in the install mode, not in the bundle mode. And also the non-payload encryption images are not supported because they are not supported for SD-WAN implementation. Next, for device onboarding, make sure the router is reachable to SD-WAN Manager and the validator to establish the control connection, and also enable the netconf YANG model on the router. And if you are manually onboarding the router, then you will need to configure some of the day zero configuration on the routers like organization name, site ID, system IP, validator IP address, or FQDN in case you have multiple validator. Okay, so here are some of the lists of the platform that is supported for your SD routing implementation. Like we discussed in the previous slide, .12, the primary focus was the device lifecycle management, and with .13 release, we added some of the configuration capabilities like security and multi-cloud connect. And you see here some of the devices with the star like ASR 1001HX, ISR 4461. These has only the monitoring capabilities. All right, so now let's understand like how do we onboard the new hardware devices into the SD routing fabric. So let's say if you have a new hardware devices, which is like a greenfield, so you have two method to onboard the routers into SD routing fabric. So first method is the plug and play method, and second method is your bootstrap. So the plug and play method is basically very similar to what we have for your SD-WAN devices. Like first you will need to add the device chassis and certificate serial number to the PNP portal, and then whitelist into the Catalyst SD-WAN Manager. Then use the SD-WAN Manager quick connect workflow to configure a day zero configuration and attach to the devices. Next, you will need to connect the internet transport to your router and make sure that your DHCP service is enabled by the internet service provider, so that your router should be getting the IP addresses, subnet mask, default gateway, DNS server address automatically from the service provider. And once that is done, your router will initiate the PNP process and try to connect the PNP portal. Once that is done, your router will be onboarded into the SD routing fabric, and you will be able to monitor it from the SD-WAN manager. The second method that we have is the bootstrap onboarding. So again, in this process, you basically need to add the router into the PNP portal, and then whitelist into the SD-WAN manager, and then follow the SD-WAN manager quick connect workflow for the day zero configuration, attach to the devices, generate the bootstrap configuration file, download the bootstrap configuration file, and then upload into the router. You can upload it via the USB drive or FTP, TFTP method, and then boot the router with the bootstrap configuration file that you have in the router, and then bring the router into the SD routing fabric. So we will be reviewing during the demo about this, how do we onboard using the bootstrap or the PNP process as well. Next, let's say if you have an existing hardware devices, how do we onboard, which is for your brownfield deployment. So again, you have a three simple method. You can use the manual onboarding method, or you can use the bootstrap or one touch provisioning method. So let's discuss one by one. So the manual onboarding method, again, you will need to whitelist the router's chassis and certificate detail into the PNP portal and download the serial.viptela file, or you can use the sync connect options to whitelist the file into the SD-WAN manager. And then you will need to configure some of the SD routing day zero configuration on the router, which is like defining your organization name, site ID, system IP, validator IP address, or the FQDN. And in case you have a multiple validator, and then the WAN interfaces, which is going to connect, or your SD-WAN manager and validator should be reachable. And then if you are using a enterprise certificate, install the root certificate on the router. Your router will be onboarded into the SD routing fabric, and you can monitor it from your SD-WAN manager. The second method that we have, the bootstrap, it's a very similar what we discussed in the previous slide. Again, you will need to whitelist the router certificate serial number into the SD-WAN manager, use the SD-WAN manager quick connect workflow, generate the bootstrap, download the bootstrap, and copy into the router CLI boot flash. And from the router CLI, you will need to execute the command to load the bootstrap configuration. That is SD-routing bootstrap load and the bootstrap file name. And then the router will be onboarded into the SD-WAN manager. The third option is probably new method for you, which is basically the one-touch provisioning method. In this method, we'll be claiming the router, the chassis and certificate serial number from the SD-WAN manager, and your router will be onboarded into the SD-WAN manager. And again, you will need to define some of the day zero configuration for your SD routing. That is your organization name, site ID, system IP, validator IP address, or the FQDN, and then the WAN interfaces from where your router will be reachable to the SD-WAN manager and the validator. So this is three simple methods that you can use to onboard your existing hardware router. That is for your brownfield deployment. So next we have for your virtual router. This is the last scenario that we have. So again, let's say if you have new virtual router, which is the Catalyst 8000 virtual router. How do we onboard it? So you can use the bootstrap method to onboard it. It's a very similar that we discussed in the previous slide. For that, you will need to generate the software-based licenses from the PNP portal, then whitelist into the SD-WAN manager, follow the manager quick connect workflow, generate the bootstrap configuration file, upload into the router boot flash, and then run the command called control-mode reset. It will load the bootstrap configuration file and onboard that will be onboarded into the SD-WAN manager. The next method is for your, let's say if you have an existing virtual router, so you will need to use the manual onboarding method. For that, again, you will need to define some of the SD routing day zero configuration on the router. And if you are using the enterprise certificate, install the enterprise certificate root CA on your router, and then your router will be onboarded into the SD-WAN manager. For existing devices, you can use the method called activating the chassis number and the token ID that we will be reviewing during the demo. Again, for that, you will need to define some of the day zero configuration on the router. That is your organization name, site ID, validated IP address, those kind of detail you need to define. So this is how you can onboard the virtual router. So now that we have covered some of the basics and all, so there are some of the command that we use for the troubleshooting and validation perspective that we also reviewing during the demo about it. So we can see here, show SD-routing connection summary. This will help you to display the information about the control connection to your SD-WAN manager, and show SD-routing connection history. That will help you to display some of the information regarding the control connection to your SD-WAN validator and the manager. If there is any error and issues, you can use it for the troubleshooting perspective. Similarly, you can use show SD-routing system status. That will display the information about the system state, software version, device model, and many other things as well. So we will be reviewing this command during the demo process. All right, so next let's move to the demo setup, and let me show you how do we onboard the routers into the SD routing fabric on SD-WAN manager. So let me just stop sharing and then start sharing my demo setup. All right, so this is the vManage that we are going to use for the demo perspective. And this is on the 20.13 software release. If I'll show you here, if you click on about, it will show you the software version. And we are going to onboard some of the routers in this SD routing fabric. And for that, let me get the access of the router. So let me just access the router here. Okay, so this is the first router that we are going to onboard, and I'm going to use the bootstrap configuration method to onboard the router. So for that, what you need basically, first of all, I need the software licenses into your SD-WAN manager. So let's see how do we generate it. So for that, you will need to go to the software.cisco.com portal here, and then scroll a bit down. Go to the network plug and play and click on manage devices. It will open the plug and play connect portal. Inside that, select the correct virtual account where we have configured the controller profile for your SD routing fabric. Now I'm into the correct virtual account, and then for the software-based licenses, click on add software devices here, and then click on add software devices. Here you will need to define the platform ID for your the software-based device that we have is the 8000 virtual, and then give the quantity, like how many software licenses that you want to generate for your Catalyst 8000 virtual router. So let's say if you want to 1, 2, 3, you can specify the number here, and then the controller profile, select the controller profile here, and then select the device mode. So this is very important here. So let's say if you select the controller mode, So this will be used for your SD-WAN deployment. And if you want to onboard as an SD routing deployment, you will need to select the autonomous mode. Since we are doing the demo for the SD routing deployment, so I'll select the autonomous mode here and then click on save. Once you do that, next thing is that you will need to click on next and then submit this thing to the PNP portal. And then you will see that it is generated. Come back here and the devices tab, you will see the devices software licenses will be generated, and you will see the name called autonomous here and then licenses detail. Let's go back to the SD-WAN manager dashboard here, and then go use the we can use the quick connect workflow, which is a new feature with your this SD-WAN manager to create the bootstrap configuration file and then attach to the device chassis number and certificate serial number. And during that process, we will also whitelist the file from the PNP portal to your SD-WAN manager. For that, you can also use the the device feature and template as well that we used to do that in the previously. Let's use the new way, which is the workflow connect. Click on quick connect here, and let's get start the workflow. So this is the 5-step process that you have. Click on next. So you can whitelist the file, the VANS list file that we have generated on the PNP portal via the, if your SD-WAN manager is reachable to the PNP portal, you can simply provide your the smart account detail here and you can whitelist it. Or simply you can download the file from the portal, like going on the portal here, PNP portal, click on the controller profile and then click on the provisioning file here. Select your controller version. Since my controller version is 20.13, so I'll select 18.3 and newer and then download the file. It will download the serial.viptela file and then upload into the SD-WAN manager. This is also the way in case your SD-WAN manager is not reachable, do not have an internet connection, they cannot reach to the PNP portal. So you can use the offline method as well. I mean the second method, upload the file into the serial number with the serial numbers. My manager is reachable to the PNP portal, so I'll just select the login into the your smart account. So I'll log in with my Cisco ID here, which is and then click on the bottom, you will see the next. Click on next here. Once you do that, it will take a couple of minutes to fetch the devices. You see here a smart account sync in currently progress. Please refresh to see the inventory devices. So let's refresh it. Once I'll refresh it, I'll see all of the SD routing devices that I have added into the PNP portal under my virtual account. So you can see here, I'll select, let's say I'm gonna select this one. And click next. Then you will need to populate some of the data here, like your host name. Let's say I'll give the host name here, site 100 router. Then give the system IP, like we discussed during the presentation, like we need to define a couple of parameters, system IP, site ID, those kind of detail. So I'm defining here. And then you can select the site. I have already created one site, which is the site 100. Apply this configuration, then click on next. This parameter is optional. You can tag it. If not needed, you can just click on next and then click on onboard. Once you're done, it will show you that the onboarding part is done. I mean the configuration workflow has been done and it is attached to your devices. Then go to the configuration and then devices. You will see here this chassis number. The workflow has been attached, site 100 router. Then click on here 3 dot to generate the bootstrap configuration. So once you click on generate bootstrap configuration, you can see here the device is in SD routing mode, and you will need to provide the WAN interfaces, which is going to connect with your validator and the manager. So in my case, the WAN interface is gigabit Ethernet 1. So I'll give the gigabit Ethernet 1 and then click on OK. It will be generated the bootstrap configuration file. You can download it from here. I have already downloaded it just to save the time and upload it into the router boot flash. If I'll go here and if I show you, so let's say if I have it or not. So I don't have the bootstrap configuration file. Let me copy it from the TFTP server. I'm going to use the TFTP method to upload it here. So simply you can run the copy tft boot flash command and then your the TFTP server IP address. In my case, this is the IP address that I have. And then give the source file name, which is your Cisco SD-WAN _ cloud int.cfg file. Hit enter key and then it will be uploaded. Let's verify in the boot flash by running the command dir boot flash. You will see here on the very top Cisco SD-WAN cloud int file is uploaded. Now next thing is that if it's a software based devices like Catalyst 8000 virtual devices we have, for that to load the router with the bootstrap configuration file, what you will need to run the command controller mode reset. This will reload the router with your bootstrap configuration file and it will participate into the SD routing fabric and will be onboarded into SD-WAN manager. So it is asking to continue. I just confirm it and it will take like a couple of minutes to do that. Meanwhile it's onboarding into the SD routing fabric. Let's perform another onboarding, which is the manual onboarding method. So let me connect other routers, which is again, it's a Catalyst 8000 virtual router. And this time I'm going to use the day 0 configuration to onboard the router. So for that, you will need to first of all enable the netconf YANG model on this the router platform. For that, you will need to go to the configuration mode here and then run the command netconf-yang, hit enter key. This command will enable the netconf YANG, activate the netconf YANG on your router, and then go to the SD routing mode, which is SD-routing, hit enter key, then define the site ID. Let's say the site ID is 200 for this particular site, and then define the system IP. So the system IP will be 1.1.200. Paste that IP that you need to provide here. Once that is done, you will also need to define the organization name. In my case, let me get the organization name here. So I'll just copy the organization name here and paste it. So this is my organization name and I'll hit enter key. Next thing is that you will need to define the WAN interface number, which is going to communicate with your SD-WAN validator and your the manager. So in my case, the gigabit Ethernet 1 is the WAN interface that is going to SD-WAN manager and the validator. So I have given the basic day 0 configuration on this router, then do the save here. Once that is done, let's verify if my router is reachable to the SD-WAN validator. For that, I'll do the ping to the SD-WAN validator IP address. And yes, it is reachable. Next thing is that get the chassis and certificates, the token ID from the SD-WAN manager and activate it here. For that, you will need to run the command called request platform software SD routing activate chassis, and then let's get the chassis number here. So since we are here on the SD-WAN manager, you can get the chassis number. Let's say I'm getting this chassis number. I'll just copy it here and then go to the router CLI, paste it here. Next thing is that get the token number. Again, go back to the SD-WAN manager. So let's see the token number here. Little bit of scroll we need to do here. Copy the token number. and then paste it. After that, hit enter key. Once you do that, it will take a couple of minutes to execute this command. Once done, let's verify with running this command SD-Routing, local properties, and summary. So you can see here the chassis number is already taken, but the serial number is no certificate installed. So it's taking some time to upload it. So let's wait for a couple of minutes to do that. You can also run, now you can see it is getting it has got the serial number here. You can also verify the connection of this router with your SD-WAN manager by running this command, show SD-Routing connection summary. This will show you the control connection with your SD-WAN manager and the validator. So it's taking a couple of minutes, just allow. Let's go back to the SD-WAN manager and verify from the monitor overview dashboard. So we can see one device is trying to connect, which is unreachable here. Let's go back once again. Oh, one of the devices onboarded here. Let's see which one has it onboarded. So here you can see the site 200 is onboarded, which is 1.1.200, your cat 8kv2, which we were trying to onboard it manually. So let's verify from the CLI as well, show SD-Routing connection summary and hit enter key, and it will show you the connection with your SD-WAN manager. So you can see it's a similar command that we have for your SD-WAN. Similarly, in place of SD-WAN, we can run the SD-Routing connection summary. It will show you the control connection, which is based on the DTLS by default with your SD-WAN manager. Similarly, there is another command as well, SD-Routing, and then connections history. This you will be using for troubleshooting perspective. Let's say you are not able to form, your router is not able to form the control connection with your SD-WAN validator or the manager. So you can see the error here, like the local error, what is the error here, or maybe the remote error. Based on that, you can take note of the error and then go back to these sections. You will find the description, what is the error means, and based on that, you can perform the troubleshooting. Next, you can run the command. Let's say you want to verify SD-Routing configuration. So you can go to the show run pipe section, SD-Routing. This will display you the SD-Routing related configuration. So this is the day 0 configuration that we have done on this router, like defining the organization name, site ID, system IP, vBond IP address, and the WAN interfaces, which is going to connect with your SD-WAN manager and the validator. Similarly, you can run the command show run pipe B section telemetry to see if the netconf YANG model is enabled. So you can run the command, and plus you can also run the command called show platform software YANG management, and then process status. That will display you like all of the services that is related to SD-Routing is enabled or not. So you can see two processes not needed for SD-Routing, which is not applicable, which is not enabled, and rest of all are enabled. So yeah, next thing is that let's see the workflow. How do we configure the security policy for your sites, and how do we enable the secure direct internet access? For that, again, let's go back to the SD-WAN manager here. From here, you can go to the configuration, and then you will see the policy group here. Click on policy group, and then you will see here the embedded security workflow. Click on add security. Let's do that. And then again, it's a 3-step process that you will be following to configure the security policies. Next thing is that click on next, define the security policy name here. In my case, it is the policy name will be, let's say, site 200 secure site 200 demo policy, let's say, and then copy and paste it the description. Again, the description is optional. So whatever the description you want, you can give it here. You will need to select what kind of solution that you are going to use for this security policy, whether you can use for the SD-WAN or SD routing. So we are just seeing the SD routing based. So I'll select the SD routing here, click on next. And then you will need to define some of the sub policies that will be the part of policy. So again, click on the sub policy here, define the source zone and the destination zone. So you can define, like I have already defined the network, which is the LAN network. You can define the rule. Let's say I am creating this rule for LAN to your WAN. I just give the LAN to WAN. And you can also define the sequence here. Rule name is also optional. If you want to change it, you can change it for your visibility or understanding. And then define the destination zone. That could be your WAN interfaces. If it's a LAN to WAN traffic, then define the match condition based on your source. If you want to define IPv prefixes, you can select it. Define your IPv prefixes, which is based on the source data prefix. Or you can also create an object here and then attach it here. So let's do that, the values, which is called data prefix. For my case, let's say 10.100.10.0/24, that will be my source data prefix list. And then what action that you want to take on this particular rule. You want to pass it, you want to drop it, or you want to inspect it. So let's just say this inspect things here, and then select the what kind of advanced inspection profile that you want to apply here. So let's create a new profile here. Here, let's define the policy name. Let's say AIP demo. And then the description, again, it's optional. You can just copy and paste the profile name and then define the intrusion prevention policy, like your IPS. Select the IPS here, click on new, and then you can define your IPS name policy. I'm just gonna give the site 200 IPS and for demo, and then define the signature set, which is the based on your balance, connectivity, security. So based on your requirement and use case, you can select what kind of security set that you want. I'll just select the security just to show you the workflow, how it's work, and then what kind of inspection mode that you need to apply. So you can select detect, you can select protect. Let's say I want to protect, I'll select the protect here. And there are some of the advanced features also you can implement. Let's say you have a custom signature set, you can upload it, you can use it. For workflow perspective, I'm showing, I'm not gonna use the advanced feature here. I'll just click add. And then you will see the intrusion policy has been created. Next thing, you can define the URL filtering policy here. You can simply click on new and create a new URL filtering policy. Let's say I'll say site 200 URL demo. And then let's say you have some of the web category that you want to block or you allow. Based on that, you can select it. Let's say I want to block some of the web categories. I'll select block here. And let's say I want to block the dating categories. I'll select dating here. And then social networking, I'll just select the social networking. You can select from the web categories that you have and then define the web reputation. Like what is the web reputation? It's a high risk, suspicious, moderate risk, low risk, trustworthy. So you can define based on your requirements. Let's say for me, it's a high risk, then I'll select the high risk here. And again, there is an advanced feature also available. You can create a sum of URL list that will be allowed. And you can also create some of the URL list that will be blocked, and you can attach it here with the part of the advanced. Plus, if you have some kind of custom messages that you want to display while it is blocked and someone is accessing in your network, so you can also modify it here. For my case, I'm just showing you the workflow, so I'll not configure the advanced feature here. And then I'll click on add. Once that is done, so we have already defined the zone-based firewall in these policies, IPS, URL filtering. The next thing is that you can also define the advanced malware protection feature also. So you can just click on here and then click new. And then let's say site 200 advanced malware protection demo. I'll just give the profile name and then select the region. You can select North America region, Europe, APGC, whichever region is nearest to you, you can select it. For me, it's North America region is nearest. Then I'll select it here. And then what kind of alert log level that you want to see. Critical, warning, informational level. So based on that, you can select the critical or warning or information. Just to show you the flow, I'll just select the critical. Again, if you want to have a file analysis, you can select the enable the file analysis here and then select the thread grade cloud region. So we have the thread grade cloud region available in the North America region and the Europe region. Based on that, you can select. And then you can also see like which kind of log that you want to analyze, critical, warning, and then informational. Again, it's a workflow. I'm just showing you, so I'll not use the file analysis, and then I'll click on add here. So we have configured all of the security policies that is embedded as the part of the embedded security policy, and then click on add here. Next thing is that click on save. So this is very important here. If you do not click on save, the policy will be not created. So you will need to click on save here, and then you will view the policies that you have created. Again, if you want to create another sub policies, click on add rule. Sorry, if you want to add some other rules as well inside the same policy, so you can click on add rules. Just like we have created the rule number 1, you can create the rule number 2 as well. Again, you can click on, let's say if you want to create a new sub policies, again, you can click on the add sub policy here and create a new sub policies. Once that is done, click on next. You can review whatever you have configured by clicking here, clicking on this down arrow. So it will give you some summary options, and then click on submit. So this is your embedded security workflow that we have completed now. Next thing is that let's create a policy group where we will be associating this embedded security policy into the policy group, and then you can associate with your devices. For that, go to the configuration and then go to the policy group here. So you see here, we have already created the embedded security, which is with the name of Site 200 demo policy. So let's create the policy group here. Click on add policy. Let's define the policy group profile, which is Site 200. I'll just give the PG and then demo. PG stand for policy group. And then the solution that you need to define, whether it's for SD-WAN or SD-routing. For my case, it's SD-routing. Again, description is optional. You can just copy and paste the policy group name, or you can define the description based on your requirement and click on create. And then you will see here Site 200 policy group demo, and then embedded the security policy that we have just created, which is Site 200 demo policy. So on the right hand side, you see it is not associated with any device. You can just simply click on this pencil icon and then click on the associated device, then click on next here, and then you have the devices onboarded here. Let's say if you want to implement this policy to some of your onboarded devices like Site 200 or Site 100, you can select the site number and then click on next. Or let's say if you are planning this policy with like pre-stage, like pre-onboarding. So let's say if you have already defined your chassis and certificate serial number into the SD-WAN manager, you can select unassign and select your devices, which one you want to apply it. And then you can click on next and pre-plan the policies and all. So let's say I want to implement it for the Site 200. I'll select the Site 200. You can click on next and then click on save. So it will ask you, do you want to provision, like do you want to deploy this policy right now, or you want to do it later? So let's say if you want to do it right now, you can click on provision devices, then select next. We have already selected, this is my chassis number, I know it, and then click on next here. It will give you options to view the side-by-side configuration. Click on next, and then you can deploy the policy on the router. So it will take a couple of minutes to deploy it. Next thing is that you can go to the monitor overview here. You can monitor your devices by clicking on the VANES router. You can click on here and you will see all of your VANES router will be onboarded. Like let's say I have onboarded this router. So you can click on this router host name and go to the system status So as the time passes, you will be seeing a lot of data for your SD routing devices. Once you onboard into the SD-WAN Manager fabric, you will be seeing like, how many times it has been crashed, what is the CPU and memory utilizes. If you have implemented some of the embedded security policy like firewall, IPS, URL filtering, AMP and TZ. So you can also go to the security monitoring here and click on firewalls, and you can monitor some of the firewall traffic and all, whatever you have configured. I don't have enough traffic here configured, so that's why we are not seeing here any data. But if you configure it, if you run it for some time, you will have some data here, you will see it. Similarly, you can monitor for the intrusion prevention and then URL filtering and AMP and TZ for that. All right, so this is what we have for today's demo. Let me just stop sharing and show you the presentation things one more time. So that will cover a couple of key highlights from today's presentation. All right, so I mean, this is some of the key point that is you should be taking out from these sessions. Like from the SD-WAN Manager, you will be able to manage the SD-WAN deployment and SD routing deployment going forward. And to do that, your the Catalyst SD-WAN Manager and the validator should be on the at least 20.12 software release, and your router should be on 70.12 software release. And from you can also get the multi-cloud workflow to connect your branches to the AWS and Azure cloud. And that is also automated from the SD-WAN Manager. And let's say if you are moving to SD routing technology, you can easily migrate to the SD-WAN going forward if you are planning to. Next, we have some of the resources that you might want to look into that. I'll just paste the link in the chat so that you can see it later. So that's it for today. That's what I have. Let me pass the session to Rigo. Rigo, you there?
Yes, Rohit, thank you so much for that excellent presentation and demo. Really appreciate it. And before we wrap up here, I'd just like to address some of the outstanding questions that we have from our audience here. One of the questions that we have is that speed test capability able to provide router-to-router iPerf statistics, or is it an internet speed test like, for example, fast.com or speedtest.net?
Yeah, so basically that feature is available from if your the SD-WAN Manager on the 20.13 software release and the router is on the 17.13 software release. So you can able to do the test like, the speedtest.net and, the URL that you put it there, that will give you the test result based on that. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And the final question that we have here from one of our audience members, security solutions should be implemented from SD-WAN and integrated on their console, or SD-WAN has all security solutions embedded on itself?
Okay, so for SD-WAN, again, you will need to define the security policies, just like what I defined for SD routing devices, like URL filtering, zone-based firewall, IPS, and AMP and DZ, those kind of policies that you need to define. And plus, for that, you will be needing some kind of a UTD container version to apply these policies to run the policies on your SD routing devices or SD-WAN devices both. So again, for SD-WAN and SD routing devices, you will need to define the policy and then attach to the devices. I just show you the workflow for SD routing. Similar workflow we have for SD-WAN as well. I'll probably post a link here so that you can go through how we implement the security policy for your SD routing devices as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rohit. Appreciate you addressing those. Well, with those questions and answers, I think we can go ahead and wrap up our webinar presentation for today. Rohit, I just want to thank you for speaking and presenting this topic with our audience. I hope that everyone found great value in the information and resources that were shared here today. For our attendees, I would also like to give a special thank you to each and every one of our panelists for lending a hand with the questions. And also for our attendees, if you do have any additional questions about today's topic, we do have an online post-webinar discussion, and I went ahead and posted the link into the the chat window there. You are going to be redirected upon exit, but feel free to save that bookmark, that link there, or bookmark it for future reference in case you have any additional questions. And also a quick reminder that you are going to receive a short pop-up survey as soon as you exit this webinar. And we would really appreciate it if you can just take a few minutes to complete it and let us know how you like today's presentation. We always look forward to receiving your valuable feedback. And again, for those of you who are interested in revisiting this session, we will have the live stream available immediately on demand for viewing, and we will also have the recording available as well on the Cisco Learning Network. I'm going to go ahead and repost the links into the chat window here in just a moment for your reference. Thanks again to our presenter, to our panelists, and to all of our attendees for joining us here live today. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.